how bad is the job market right now?
In 2026 alone, there have been over 120,000 people who've been laid off. That's about 1,000 people a day.
This is Keki Mwaba, career and recruitment expert, and we discuss the state of the tech job market and what you can do about it.
I think almost CVs are too good these days.
How do I not seem fake?
Did I just automate myself out of a job? Was this my fault? What did I do? If I was an engineer who wanted to work at Anthropic, OpenAI, or similar sort of companies, this is the step I would take. Number one,
I wanted to talk about the job market. And from your perspective, how bad is the job market right now?
job market's not great, quite frankly. I think it just depends on different industries, different roles. But if you sort of look at it in general, hiring in 2026 isn't what it used to be compared to like the pandemic boom or even 2023. So there's significantly less roles available, particularly within tech than other sectors. So for example, if you're like a care worker working in nursing or, old age care, yes, there'll be an abundance of jobs. But for people within tech, there's significantly less opportunities, and it's a more competitive market, I think. Yeah.
Specifically for software engineers or also for some of the other roles like product or architects, designers?
Yeah, across different roles, I think engineering has changed in terms of what kind of engineer. So for example, I've worked at Reddit and Uber and Disney Plus, and when I was sourcing, it was heavy on like backend, Android, iOS engineer. But of course, with AI, we're looking for more AI specific engineers. So the type of engineer has changed, as well as like within the space of design for people who are like product designers, UX, UI designers. They also are significantly less roles available than it was even for product roles. So I think we are seeing quite a shift within the market. Yeah.
And is this specifically, from your perspective, due to AI? Because that's what I've seen in the market.
A lot to do with AI. So for example, in 2026 alone, there have been over 120,000 people who've been laid off. That's about 1,000 people a day. And it has been within sort of larger tech companies. So for example, OpenAI is still hiring. They plan on doubling their workforce before the end of the year. So small, medium-sized AI-based companies, they're still growing. But if we look across larger tech, we've seen significant layoffs. However, there's still almost 60,000 software engineer vacancies available at the moment. So it almost kind of doesn't make sense when you look at it in the surface. How can so many people be laid off, but a lot of hiring managers and companies are still saying that they're struggling to find the right talent?
What's your hunch? Because those two don't really add up.
Yeah, right. The math is not mathing.
Yeah.
So I think my hunch is a lot of companies do layoffs initially to do cost saving. So, it seems like a cost saving initiative at first. And then sometimes I've even seen those same companies who's laid off people rehire them back. And this is after they've given them a package and everything. And then they realize, oh, we thought AI could do everything, but actually we still need people. We still need engineers, designers, product people to do the work. So they've been rehired in a few companies as well. So it's sort of like a little bit of a wave. It's like layoffs and hiring. So, and it's happening more at an accelerated rate, I think, in the last year or two than ever before.
A few years ago, I spoke to also a recruiter on the show, and they mentioned kind of these not nice engagements, specifically with software engineers, because a lot of recruiters were actually actively engaging with software engineers, and they might not get the nicest reply, kind of depending on that interaction. Also because software engineers were just very much in demand from a market perspective. And now I think things have kind of shifted where you might apply for a job and you might not get a reply back. And I see posts online with people that have applied to hundreds of jobs without a single reply or AI automated replies. Like, it's kind of disheartening if you're looking for a job and you can't even get a foot in the door. LinkedIn used to be the platform where kind of people found each other. Has that changed?
So LinkedIn is actually still the platform, still the number one hiring platform, even within tech. So a lot of data shows that still it's the biggest source of talent, the easiest way to find people. I think the mistake people make is treating LinkedIn like a digital CV instead of a platform. So I think back in the day, a lot of engineers used to get so many messages from recruiters. And I was one of those recruiters, like spamming people. I think I used to message like 50 to 100 engineers per day to try and fill our roles. And maybe my response rate was around like 20%. And out of those 20%, maybe only 10% would be interested and want to have a conversation. So I think that's shifted a lot now in the sense that engineers engineers are getting less reach outs from recruiters, and the ones who do get a lot of messages, job opportunities, are the ones usually who are treating LinkedIn like a portfolio. And by that, showcasing their work, their results, they have a good network, they're talking about the projects that they're working on. So from that perspective, I think networking is still going to be very important. And also, like, be nice and reply to the recruiter's message. You know, if it's a nice message, if it's tailored, if it's not generic, like dear first name, you know, if they actually did put in a little bit of an effort, because you never know, you might be laid off one day, which sounds a bit scary, and I don't want to like shock people or anything, but one of the things I notice when layoffs happen is a lot of people start to go through their inbox to see, oh, who messaged me here, who messaged me there. And at least if you kept the door open and had some kind of conversation, it's so much easier to revisit that if worst case scenario happens and you end up getting laid off.
Yeah. LinkedIn as a digital CV, I feel like I do that. I haven't really posted on LinkedIn as much. So then even to shift and look at it from a platform perspective rather than a digital TV, for the people listening, or digital CV, for the people listening, what can they do actively to make it not just a digital CV?
Yeah. So I think the temptation is always to just list where you've worked, what you've done, maybe a couple skills, add your colleagues on there, classmates, and leave it at that. And that is a massive opportunity you are wasting, because visibility is key. And I know it sounds a little bit cringe to feel like you have to create visibility for yourself, but you have to think of your own personal branding. And personal branding, you have to treat yourself like a product. Of course, you're a human being and you live and breathe and think. But if you treat yourself like a product and be like, how can I market and sell this product and my skills, then you're not going to see it as a digital CV. So for example, one of the posts that do the best on LinkedIn, particularly within engineering or tech in general, is people who talk about their learnings and their failures as well. So for example, what our team broke when we built this product, or how we saved costs when we scaled or something like that, or we lost money, here are our mistakes. People tend to feel like that's more genuine and also it can add value from there. So it takes a little bit of, you know, braveness to put your work out there. So maybe you've built a really cool product you're fond of, or a chatbot or something like that. Talk about it and let people see it as well. And that will help you not see LinkedIn just as a CV, but as a place to showcase your work. And also a little personality, who you are, you know. You're not going to be exactly the same as another person. So seeing LinkedIn as that place to show who you are will also attract the right opportunities and people to you.
Yeah. The hard part for me is if you're really comfortable in where you are and you enjoy your work, there's no real kind of incentive, at least for the short term, for you to actively start doing that. And it is a time investment. So then when shit hits the fan and all of a sudden you do need that, you might be too late if you haven't actually put in the effort. How do people, or how have you kind of collaborated with people to make this happen, to make that a habit or make it easier for them to do so? Because for me, it's quite hard, actually, to actively post and continuously do so, because time is limited.
Correct. You have a full-time job, you run this podcast, your life is very full, of course. So maybe like, LinkedIn can sort of slip into the back of your mind. But I think one of the ways to do that is also to time your engagement with the platform. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to spend 5 to 10 minutes per day, otherwise you end up doom scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. But if you view it as how can I contribute to this platform as opposed to just consume, that can be great. And one of the most underrated ways is actually through not only creating content by commenting, right? So let's say, for example, one of my clients that I was coaching, I was his career coach, and he wanted to transition from a software engineer role, senior software engineer, to a manager role. And one of the strategies we did was actually, I was like, okay, let's draw up a list of companies, all the managers there, and start engaging with their LinkedIn posts. So he started like commenting on all their like posts with really insightful comments, not just like, good job, team. I like this, interesting insights. Nothing generic. It was really thoughtful. So he'd be like, oh, have you considered this when building that? Or what about how do you solve for that when building that or scaling that? And from that sense, by the time he actually did did message those engineering managers at the companies he was interested in, they're already quite familiar with his name. They're like, hey, we've seen this name before. We've engaged with him before. And they were so much more open. And he ended up making that leap from senior to a manager just through engaging with comments, but hardly ever posting himself. And in the beginning, it was quite intimidating because he felt like, oh, what if I'll be judged? What should I say? I don't know. But then in the end, he saw it as just having conversations with people and learning and sharing information. And from that, he was able to move his career forward without ever sending a single job application.
Comment might be then a misnomer. Like if you say it's driving conversation, then that's very different. You're interacting or you're sharing your opinions or even asking a question specifically. That's quite interesting to me. What I've seen, and I'm kind of new to Instagram as a platform because we now post podcast clips on there, and I'm in an AI bubble. All the people that already have quite of a big following would say, if my following disappears, here's what I would do. 10 to 15 posts with LinkedIn, using your favorite AI tool to just bombard the platform with posts and posts and posts and every day. And I'm like, wow, that would just, you would go hard on the quantity side. I don't know about the quality side, but for me, it would be kind of robotic. That's also what I've seen on LinkedIn. Some people are calling out other people's comments specifically, if they're quite robotic, or their posts specifically in the tonality. What's your take on that? Is AI and kind of how people are treating this as a platform also ruining it?
Definitely. Have you ever seen AI generated comments on LinkedIn? Like, can you spot
I've seen
them?
other people call them out, and I'm like, yeah, it does look weird, but only after they've been called out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is a bit brutal. I've seen people screenshot, name everything of someone who does a lot of AI comments and calling them out. So I think LinkedIn really is cutting down on that. So even the LinkedIn algorithms have changed. Before, what used to be the best way to get visibility was the number of likes, but maybe you've noticed one of the things on LinkedIn posts that have changed in the last couple of months have been like the number of saves, how many people have saved your post, the number of sends, as well as even a read time. So that boosts visibility because it was being spammed with bots. And I think the developers of of LinkedIn sort of noticed that, and therefore they changed it. So it's not always about comment engagement, like engagement, but other sort of forms of engagement that develop the authenticity of a post. But if I'm being completely honest, I think I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn. On the one side, many of my job opportunities that I've gotten at really cool companies have been through the platform. And on the other side, I sometimes see content that doesn't connect with me or just feels like, a little bit spammy or too AI developed. But I think there's still so much opportunity on there. So I'm actually curious, Patrick, how do you feel about LinkedIn as a platform in general? And has that maybe changed over the years for you?
Yeah. So growing up, I never used social media. The only reason I started using social media was, frankly, because of the podcast. And then I took LinkedIn and posting at least once a week quite seriously, quite consistently. But then I just lost energy because I did it because I thought I needed to do it rather than actually finding joy in that. So now I only post quite infrequently, to be honest. When something happens, something that I want to share, that's the platform for me to share it on. And I don't post on any other platform. I do read and I do consume because I think it's interesting to see what people are doing, or I'm also in my AI bubble. So from a news perspective, it's interesting to me. But the only shift that I've seen is that I now more actively do see people engaging with comments, or do see people actually trying to put themselves out there from a personal branding perspective. I did not recognize that as much years ago. So I think this narrative of, okay, the market might not be as good and people are working more on their personal brand, I see that on LinkedIn more so than I used to see before, which I think is a good thing in the end. I don't know if specifically your company is reorganizing, if you can do much to prevent a layoff in your department or something impacting you. But I think in advance, already taking some precautions, it can't hurt, but it needs time investment from my perspective. What else do you think people can do from a layoff perspective in their own circle?
Yeah. So I think never feel safe. And not to say that you have to worry or stay up at night worrying you'll be laid off, but nothing is really stable, I guess, in this life. And by being ready, I think that's really important. So for example, always having a great CV, I think is good. Tracking the work that you're doing And if you have a feeling a layoff might be coming, there's so many things you can do to prepare for that. So one of the things I always encourage people to do is write down everything you've done. If they're documents you can say from the company, nothing confidential, just maybe your own work, build up your own portfolio. That's going to be super important. Second, it's also good to know your rights. So it depends which country that you're in. So for example, in a lot of European countries, it's very hard to lay people off immediately versus in the US, you can be here today, gone tomorrow. So always know what your contract is, if there's no non-compete, if there's garden leave or anything like that, so that you can be ready. And I highly recommend people to contact a labor lawyer in advance, because just a 1-hour consultation with a labor lawyer can save you thousands later in terms of negotiating a great package, knowing your rights in advance, which is super important. And I think thirdly, and this is a little bit of a controversial one, but maximize all your company benefits before you leave the company. So for example, if you have insurance or dental or healthcare or any sort of benefits that could go away once a layoff's announced, or maybe you're frozen out of the system, can't log back in, as that sometimes happens. A layoff can be announced and you can't log back in. So I think that's important to also understand what benefits you have and use them while you can.
I wonder how much this narrative of layoffs and also kind of AI being the catalyst for laying people off stresses people out that already have a job, that kind of layoffs are potentially looming or they might be impacted in that same way. If we're talking about the quantities, like 120,000 is a lot of people. And when it happens, at least in my social feed, it's there because people are liking it, empathizing with the people, sending messages. I see other people that have been impacted then react to it as well. My feed is then full of it. And I understand I'm in my bubble and it might not impact me as much. But for the people that are in similar, let's say, big tech organizations, I wonder what it does from their own kind of job security perspective. Do you have any insights on that specifically?
Yeah,
or
of
any
course.
thoughts?
So I think that layoffs really create quite a change in morale inside a company. So the fact that you will still be there, and as great as, maybe some of our labor laws in Europe are that, it has to go through the Works Council and many other groups, you still have to go to work a lot of the time. So knowing the end is near, or rumors that the end is near, and you still have to be there, can really, really demotivate people and really worry people. Will my next job match my last salary? What will I be doing? Will the job market be flooded? So for example, I know a client of mine who actually helped AI adoption at a company, and she was scaling it for 2 years. It's going really, really well, almost too well that they were like, we actually don't need you anymore. And she was like, did I just automate myself out of a job? Like, was this my fault? What did I do? And now she realized she has a massive opportunity to do consultancy. So she's shifted entirely from looking at, I need a stable, full-time, permanent position, to actually consult at different companies. So she's even has a higher income. So her layoff was actually a good thing, doing consultancy work for these different companies that are looking at AI adoption within their company. So even if you are laid off, always consider different ways. It might not be a full-time job for you next time. And I think the shift we're seeing is also people who were maybe hired at big tech companies. So let's say they were at Meta, Google, Amazon, Atlassian. Their next job is actually less likely to be another big tech company. So it can be a smaller company. It can be maybe a company less well known that's making really cool tools, adoption, chatbots, other kind of things. So I think it's important to stay open-minded. But I think our ego is a little bit sometimes attached to the sort of company that we work at. Like, oh, I've only worked at these companies, and what if my next company is smaller and less well-known? But you might find it might be even more enjoyable. Maybe you have more autonomy, work on projects and products you enjoy more. So I think a layoff definitely isn't the end of the world. And it's always important while you're still employed to reflect on, what do I enjoy about my current job? What do I love working on? What would I like to work on next? As layoffs often shake people up to be like, oh, okay, I need to reconsider my life. But I think there's so much reflection you can do even where you are today.
I've also seen this narrative where this is from a hiring perspective. People are saying the resumes that I get, let's say for an individual contributor, software engineering position, all resumes kind of look tailored, custom made to the profile that we put out there. And all the job experience, at least from a resume perspective, they look like they completely fit, which means that already just looking at resumes, if previously you used to see a few that would really stand out. Now all of them stand out and they come in volumes. It's really hard to find the right people, both from a hiring perspective as well as if you are the person sending your resume, to distinguish yourself. And I think personal branding and putting yourself out there on a platform, engaging with the people that are hiring like that is a great step. Keeping up to date with your resume and the work that you've done is also something that you've mentioned. Is there something missing that people can still do to put themselves out there?
Yeah, so I think almost CVs are too good these days. Like they're too tailored to the job but then when you actually start interviewing and speaking to someone, being like, okay, you said you built this, tell me about it. And they're like, they can't really speak much on it. So I think from that perspective, it still is good to have a great CV tailored to the role, but an interview will allow you to sort of assess a candidate a lot better. And the thing is, a lot of candidates start to sort of look the same, like have similar experiences, similar skills. So to stand out even more, that is where good old-fashioned relationships come into play. So if you have someone who can refer you for the role, if you already have a network at the company, and this is something I encourage early graduates to really focus, because they are significantly less entry-level tech positions than previous years, than even 2024 and before. So for example, as a student, it's kind of the last thing you're thinking about, right? You're just trying to get through your exams, pass your thesis, and maybe you'll apply for a couple jobs. No, you actually need to focus on already building a job search strategy in your studies. So if you already start going to community events, networking events, being really integrated into the tech community in your city, or if your city doesn't have a big tech community, online communities, building relationships online and in person, so that by the time you graduate, you can maybe find a really cool traineeship, internship, or some kind of junior position. So I encourage people to do that, but that's not a skill you really get taught in university. I'm like, I don't know about you, but my school didn't really teach me. It was like, you've graduated, all the best, and they sort of just push you out of the nest, and you're like, okay.
Fly.
So exactly, fly, little one.
Yeah.
But I think they should be greater emphasis on those kind of, you could say, softer skills in terms of how to speak with people, how to interview, how to build a career in school, so that by the time you graduate, particularly with a more competitive market, that's going to be there. So I remember when I was doing my master's here in the Netherlands, I think we had like a one-day workshop on the Dutch job market, and it was so fast and so much information. By the time I left, I was like, I don't know what to do. How am I going to find a job in this country? So, and that's what I love doing as both a coach and a recruiter, is really helping people to understand how they can position themselves so that they can stand out to other applicants. Because at the end of, like, especially your studies, a lot of CVs start to look the same, but there's still things you can do to put yourself ahead.
I would like your perspective on the roles, because we started this conversation with they are evolving compared to a few years ago specifically. And I've also seen this narrative, or some people are considering even switching careers from software engineer to something else specifically because they feel like this craft might actually be obsolete. And the frontier labs, the AI companies that are driving this and bringing out kind of tools to accelerate software engineers, some people have also said, well, software engineers or the role will change and we don't need 100%, we might only need 20%. So people are being laid off. They're still open positions, but they're very competitive. And I wonder, from maybe a role or a job perspective, how have you seen things changing? And do you think software engineers still have a place in, let's say, a few years or even more?
Yeah, I think software engineers will definitely have a place, but I think they need to shift their skills and stay updated with the market. So for example, when I used to search for software engineers as a recruiter, it'd be very basic: backend, Java, Python. The skill set has entirely changed today in terms of what's going to be most needed. And for example, funny story, one of my clients who I was coaching, he's been a backend software engineer for many years. He's at the staff level. And he told me, he's like, you know what, Keki, I think I've always wanted to be a plumber, actually.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, tell me more. He was like, I'm seeing a shift in the market. I've always liked working with my hands. He was like, I use AI to code and do all of my tasks 90% of the time. And I'm honestly just bored. And I was like, okay, so why plumbing? He's like, I've always enjoyed it. He was like, my dad was a plumber. And he always used to look down on his dad a little bit for having such a manual job. At the time, he was like, oh, I'm going to work in a company and be corporate. That'll be like the level up. And he was like, I actually feel a bit bad that I sort of, as a kid looked down on my dad being a plumber, but I also learned those skills. So there's actually been a massive, not a massive shift, but a smaller shift in terms of people looking at jobs that are likely not going to change, at least in the next few years. So plumbing, being a mechanic, electrician, those sort of skills that are not super easy to pivot to, but that'll still be available and around that you can run a successful business with. So I think that's something really interesting, to have a sort of more manual job and also be really happy doing it. At the end of the day, I think your happiness is what's most important. And if you can find something that gives you the life you want and you're happy and you're enjoying it, I say go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do think a lot of people came into this field specifically for kind of the job security and the quite great salary and benefits package that you could get, especially with the time investment that it needed. There was a narrative years ago that you could take a boot camp or be self-educated and land a really good job. Right now, it's very competitive, I feel like, because of layoffs, but also because of specifically the skills and the capabilities changing. So the people that really know what they're doing, that have years experience and kind of have a taste for how to create software, now have tools that accelerate them specifically, which means that, productivity increases. I know there's a lot of studies out there where the results show it might still be lacking or there's cognitive debt, but from an experience perspective, I do think productivity overall increases. That's what companies are betting on. Plus, these tools also have a cost factor and the costs are increasing. So they're betting on smaller teams, potentially more seniority, and then accelerating in that way rather than going the volume route and having multiple teams. It's a lot more competitive is what I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more competitive. And I'm interested in hearing from you, Patrick, as a fellow, as a software engineer yourself. Have you ever had any concerns about your own job security when you sort of look long-term into your own career?
Yes, I think my job is quite interesting because I am in a consultancy right now. And I do think right now, there's a lot of companies with a lot of questions. And then at least in Europe specifically, I think there's more investment in hiring people and hiring the right person. So if you can't afford that, or if hiring is really hard and you have a really good partnership or collaboration with consultants, people that you trust, they might go that route more specifically. That's my assumption. That's what I've seen. But my role has also shifted. A couple of years ago was in product, then I went back to hands-on because I had the biggest FOMO and I wanted to actually have hands-on experience. And now I'm in a role where my responsibility is to accelerate more AI adoption, best practices, but also be kind of a front runner with certain technologies and experiments in organizations. I think right now is definitely the time to experiment. But like you mentioned, I do see there is an end of the line because if the organization is going smoothly, things are being adopted, we have really resilient metrics, then the work needing to do for adoption, that will disappear in that organization specifically. I don't know if I want to do that again in multiple organizations.
Yeah.
But I find a lot of joy in creating. I find a lot of joy in these types of interactions. I think if I would want to do one thing, it would be to have these types of conversations and kind of knowledge sharing more on the day-to-day. Because right now it's a very tiny, like 10% of my time goes into this. That's how I see my job. I don't know if I will be software engineer for many years down the line, but I do still, in the roles that I've had, I've always identified as a software engineer. Like I do take pride in that, and that craft is completely changing. So it's kind of a hard one, thinking about my own career. I do see a lot of possibilities, but I don't want to narrow down just yet. I want to do everything, but my time is limited. Yeah.
Of course. And I think that's so cool that you've also transitioned, right? In terms of, you're like, oh, I want to be focused more on this, on that, and now consultancy, AI adoption, emerging technologies. And I think the fact is that sort of is really where we're at in terms of the job market, staying flexible, being open to trying different projects and seeing if you can still be creative and do what you enjoy. So you're not only a technical person, but you also love people, which, this podcast gives you the opportunity to do, which is fantastic. And I think, that's why I think back to posting on LinkedIn, you've got so many stories, so much information to share with the world. For me, if I was a software engineer, even as a non-engineer, I'd be like, I want to learn what's going on in Patrick's life, what you're working on, projects, non-confidential sort of information you can share. And I think when you see it as information sharing, that also gives you, weirdly enough, job security, as it positions you as the expert. It positions you as someone who's open, increased visibility, more recruiters reaching out to you, more conference or speaking opportunities or something like that. So from that perspective, there's still ways that you can engage with people, but it has to be intentional.
Yeah, I'm not really as intentional with it specifically. Like the podcast is, I think, my biggest portfolio, my body of work that I have out there. And through there is opportunity. So then LinkedIn is more on the back burner because I feel like I don't have to do that as a flywheel specifically. And when I do, I like talking more than I like writing. I like also listening more than I like reading. So it fits better with me as a person specifically. If I didn't have that, I do think I would do more with that because otherwise that whole kind of flywheel changes specifically. But yeah, working on a portfolio right now, I feel like, especially to get yourself or give yourself an edge, I think it's a must, or at least people need to think about it more intentionally, like you mentioned. Yeah. From a job description perspective, looking at tooling or the roles that people are asking, is AI already embedded in there, or how have job descriptions specifically changes? Do people have more responsibilities as engineers? What have you seen?
Yeah. So over the past year, there's a 70% increase in job descriptions mentioning AI-related technologies as a skills requirement, even for non-engineering roles. So you can be in marketing and they're like, okay, we'd like you to know how to automate our projects better and track the process of how our clients are doing using AI tools. So there was a recent study that showed that 66% of hiring managers at Microsoft would not hire someone who had zero AI skills. And that's even being reflected in job descriptions. So I think it's really important to, even on your CV, highlight the tools, projects that you've worked on using AI, as well as look at job descriptions and see how they've changed. So a job description today versus 2 years ago is completely different in terms of often the required skills, what you're expected to work on, etc. And I think that that's also a shift in the job market that we're seeing.
For people that are thinking about kind of their career path, for me, I think if you asked me a few years ago, engineering manager was definitely one of them. And I think now less and less. And the main reason because of that is if AI tooling and the capabilities we have now allow everyone to build specifically, then I do think we need less managers and more people that are capable and actually executing and delivering. So this career path where I thought you can move up, I think is going to be limited to a smaller scope of people. That's my hunch, which makes it less attractive for me to kind of go all in there. I am a people person, I think, more and more. I love talking about people about personal development, personal growth, but those opportunities at companies, I think, will be more limited. Is that a trend that you have seen as well?
Yeah, correct. So a lot of layoffs have actually affected middle management.
Yeah.
They're looking more for extremely in-depth technical individual contributors, and middle managers are significantly becoming less and less and less. And I think with being a manager as well, it's often less, you're expected still to be technical. So a lot of engineering manager roles that are posted currently still require, still a stack in terms of your technical expertise as opposed to, more people management side of things. So it's almost the ability to do both. For example, even outside of tech, one of my clients who's a marketing, senior marketing manager, for marketing manager roles she was interviewing for, she still needed analytics experience. And she said to me, Keki, she's like, I haven't done in-depth analytics since, my first entry-level roles. And now I'm being asked as a manager to really analyze data, pull reports, present it to the C-suite. So even for like non-super technical roles, technical expertise is still being required. So I think your skill set has to stay sharp regardless of what level you are at. And because paths have become less traditional, it started a junior engineer, mid-level, senior, manager. Manager was always the end goal, the proof that I've made it in this world. I am a manager. And that is also changing. And I think it's a good thing. It's not to say that you can't only be a manager or you shouldn't be a manager, but I think there are more possibilities and options to be considered too.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that indeed for what you mentioned, non-technical roles also requiring not technical skills more and more out there. Specifically for software engineers, I wonder if the responsibilities or the ask is actually, well, valid is maybe the wrong word, but it's a big ask for people to be able to stay up to date with all the tooling and technology that evolves, as well as be capable from what they need to do on a day-to-day perspective, and potentially do even more above and beyond for the companies that they work for. I think it's a lot. Like, I don't have any, let's say, financial responsibilities. I pay rent. I don't own a house. I don't have any kids. I want to go on vacation. So that's like my ambition. And I can and I go. But I also have a lot of time to invest in this job market and invest in this career. And I wonder how my experience would be, experience being just me driving my own career path with more responsibilities, because then my time would be even more limited. Like, I don't know how people with kids or people with definitely other responsibilities, more responsibilities than I can imagine, would do and are doing nowadays. I hope it's also okay for those people to just be like, well, I focus on these things and this is what I can do and this is what I'm capable of and what I can manage. But yeah, because of the competitiveness, things are shifting quite quickly.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's sort of two types of people when it comes to, let's say, people who have families and more responsibilities, mortgages, sort of that. Some of them are comfortable, like you said, just to mention, to be like, hey, my focus right now isn't on climbing the ladder or working on more challenging projects. I'm just comfortable in my role, maybe not going to learn as many new skills, stay reasonably updated, but, this is the level I'm comfortable at. And then you get those people who still have all those additional responsibilities, family, house, kids, all of that. And they also still want to stay updated in terms of everything going on. And that group is actually at a massive risk of burning out. And many of them, unfortunately, do. To be able to stay visible, stay, up to date and relevant with changing technologies, and have all those additional responsibilities. So it really, really is hard. So I think taking care of yourself both inside and outside of work is very, very important. Leaning on support systems, as well as just asking yourself, how am I doing? Am I doing okay? And also planning your time to be like, okay, I can only spend maybe an hour a week on side projects, on learning new things, on other things, which is also valid, right? Or reducing your work week. But I know, for example, as recruiters, some of us would be hesitant to hire maybe more experienced people, because with more experience sometimes can come more resistance to learn new things compared to a recent graduate who's like, wants to learn everything. They know they don't know that much. A more senior person in a team can have more resistance to learning new things or technologies. So I think it's definitely good to have that balance. And that's the best part about having a team with diverse experiences, right? Because other teammates can teach you things, to be like, hey, I've been playing around with this tool. Do you want to take a look at it? So it's not always just, boring studying stuff at home, but it can be informal conversations, other people showing you their work, you working on stuff together. That can actually be fun as well.
As a last thought, I wanted to do somewhat of an exercise with you, because if I look at specifically the job market that I am in, the frontier labs are, I think, the labs where things are accelerating and evolving the quickest. They're also the companies, and it doesn't have to be the frontier labs, it can also be kind of adjacent companies to them, that bring out a lot of tools that software engineers either love to use or hate to use, or companies at least want them to use, which would be a really interesting, I think, environment to learn from, to build connections, and to work in. So let's say if someone listening wants to work at, name the biggest companies, it could be OpenAI, Anthropic. Is there a stepped approach that they can take specifically to put themselves out there, get a foot in the door, and potentially land the job?
Yeah, for sure. So if I was an engineer who wanted to work at Anthropic, OpenAI, or similar sort of companies, this is the step I would take. Number one, ask myself, why do I want to work at these companies? Is it just the name? Is it the brand? Or are there actually products, tools that you find really, really cool that you're working on? Second, do deep research into them. So really understand how they work, how they've built. There's a lot of open source or publicly available information about them that is also there. Thirdly, try and connect with someone who does work there. So for example, it might be someone in your network, friend of a friend, or, even someone who used to work there. So if you can sort of have some kind of conversation, that will really help you get your foot in the door, because those teams also get so many applications that relationships, referrals are still going to be really, really key. And also lastly, look at their tech stack. So if there are things that you can learn, things that you can improve upon, really, really start to understand it. And then when you apply, show those companies this is what you've worked on. So I always really liked it when someone, would put on their CV or on their LinkedIn like a project section that you can click on, look at the stuff they've worked on, the impact, etc. Even if it's just a prototype, not to say that it has to be live and have millions of downloads or something like that, but something that you can actually see and click through, I think is really, really cool. So by taking some of those steps, I think that gives you a better chance of getting into companies that you really want.
The step where you mentioned find a colleague that now works there or someone in your network to actually reach out to them, that would I would feel withheld, because I feel like a lot of people would do that. And how do I put myself out there, send a message without making it seem like I want to work at that company? Like if I haven't had a bond with them or a message interaction before, they might get a lot of people similar to that. How do you make it kind of, I would say, organic, authentic? How do I not seem fake?
Got you. It seems really overwhelming, right? Messaging someone, dear engineer.
I want to work at your company and I know you work there.
Exactly. But sometimes it can be just that simple, right? So I think what's important to do is also take a data approach to reaching out to people. So for example, when I wanted to work at some of the companies I did, so for example, when I joined Reddit, I was like, okay, who's working there? Let me make a list of people and let me start reaching out. So right now, the response rate on LinkedIn is only around 20%. So if you send out 100 messages, only 20 people would reply to you. So with that in mind, it kind of makes you realize rejection or being ghosted on there is going to be inevitable, but also really personalize your message. So if you wanted to reach out to an engineer, maybe you can say, oh, I watched your talk on YouTube. I really liked what you mentioned about this and this. Or, oh, I saw you at that conference, So when you give a more personal hook and make it about them instead of about what you want, I want job, give me job now, please. It sort of connects with people like, oh, thank you for looking at my work, who I am, how can I help you, etc. And it can help in the sense that, you never know where your profile might land. So of course, someone can say no, but someone also might say yes. But you'll never know if you don't ask. And it takes a little bit of practice. So if you send out different kind of reach out messages on LinkedIn, track those. So if you send out message A and you get a 10% response rate versus message B that gets a 40% response rate, which one are you going to use, right? So I think it takes a little bit of experimentation as well as just being brave.
Yeah. Engineering the messaging process and keeping track, that's not something I've thought of. I kind of just do it. But yeah, actually putting a process in place might be really helpful. You mentioned portfolios as well. The body of work that someone has done for others to see, click through, prototype or not. For me, my level of ambition kind of keeps rising because I know what is now possible, what I can do. Making or putting out something that is quite small and simple would be like, but I want to do something grand and bigger. And because I want to do something grand and bigger and don't have the time, that's kind of my analysis paralysis of me actually taking step one. Are there things in portfolios that you've seen that you were like, this is actually quite simple, but very effective in showing what someone has done or can do?
Yeah, so I think showing what you can do, even if you haven't done it yet, is really important. So for example, one of my clients was a UX product designer, and they wanted to transition into retail. So what they did is looked at the Adidas app and showed, hey, this is what your app looks like right now. This is how I would change it to improve it by doing these modifications, changing this, that, and completely revamping the app. And I thought that was really cool because they didn't actually have a body of work to show within that space that could be relevant. By showing what I would do, what I would change, what I would improve, just gets a company to be able to see your thinking. And showcasing your thinking can be just as important, even if the product isn't completely finished. If it's clear, if it's concise, if I can follow through, it makes me think, you know what, I think you can add a lot of value to this team. Tell me more.
Yeah. The visual aspects of those portfolios, for me, they're always, when I see someone do that, I'm like, yeah, that one, it just makes a lot of sense. How do you see that from software engineers and their portfolios specifically? Can they do something similar? This is how I would do X, Y, and Z, even though their work might not have a bigger visual component? Or how do you see that?
Yeah, so without a visual component, it does, make it more challenging. But I think being able to walk through the steps of even what you did. So even if you can't show, so, we had this challenge, what we wanted to do, we went through these steps, it resulted in this. This is how we're monitoring, reiterating it. So still showing like even a flow of your thinking. And if there's any sort of code or something you can show behind that, I think that can be just as important, even if it's not visually as like, wow, Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Maybe that's why one of the thoughts that I had was whenever there's an outage, there's always an outage report that companies put out there specifically. That's something you can definitely engage with. And I've been told that if you read them, you can learn a lot as well. So that can be part of the body of work where you go through this exercise of, okay, this is how I would approach an improvement based on kind of an outage report. I think that's quite interesting. It's very different than having a portfolio and a body of work on open source, on personal projects. It's very much actionable based on what you've seen from a company surface perspective, which I think is interesting.
That is interesting. And I think reading other people's portfolios, like have you seen other engineers' portfolios by any chance?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you can get inspired by that. So rather than reinvent the wheel, you can take, bits and pieces of other people's work to be like, oh, I really love the way this person presented that or that person, or parts I can take from this outage report. So I think there's a lot of inspiration out there, and like doing pieces bit by bit over time, maybe 6 months from now, you're like, oh, I have like some work I can show that I've been collecting over time.
For the person that's listening, they might have a little bit of LinkedIn presence or they might not. They're likely a software engineer. But what would your advice be to at least do within the next few weeks with regards to personal branding?
So number one advice, don't be afraid of being seen. Be visible. Don't worry about looking too desperate or too thirsty out there. And showcase your work. So if you have a project that you've worked on, even if it's not recent, talk about it, So something I want to highlight is this or that, or we solved this by doing that. And it's also nice to sometimes tag your teammates who you worked on something with. Sharing advice, engaging with other people's comments. So I'm sure they're really great people to follow out there. For example, I love Gerge from The Pragmatic Engineer, who I'm sure you know. He posts a lot of like tech articles that are really interesting on the state of the job market, where software engineering is right now, and other sort of people who you can follow to start to get inspiration and ideas and engage with their work. So, start small. So you don't have to go from zero to influencer. There's somewhere in between where you can start to do it in a way that feels organic and authentic to you.
Keki, thanks so much for coming on and sharing. This was great.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me.
That's it.